Hello my friends, welcome to Anna's Violets. I'm Anna and I am helping you grow beautiful and healthy plants. So in this video I'm going to tell you all the steps that you need to know to grow any plant successfully. So we will be talking about pots, soil, light, watering, fertilizing, propagation and repotting. So let's talk about pots. How do you choose pots for your different plants? This is a very important topic to talk about because actually the health, the speed of growth of your plants really depends also on the pot. I think this is something that people don't really pay attention to. They just take any pot that they have at the moment and then they plant whatever they have, what type of plant they have in that pot. And especially this goes also to the pots that we just really like them because they're beautiful, but they are not really suitable for the plants. So what type of pots you can normally find in your local greenhouses, garden centers, or local plant stores? Well, basically this will be plastic pots, then ceramic pots and clay pots. Well, what's different between them, right? So let's start from plastic pots. Well, plastic pots, normally they do not have holes, or they do have holes actually, or even if they don't have holes, we can easily make holes in them. That's not a problem. Of course, you know that for plants, it's better that the pots have holes because then the excess of water can go through the holes and do not stay in the soil. And also the air ventilation, the access of the air to the roots is much better if the pots have holes. But the thing is that the plastic pot is not breathing from the sides, so this means that it holds actually moisture for a longer period compared to the clay pots. And the clay pots, normally they always come with holes, well, the majority of them basically. But even if you will find a clay pot without a hole, again, you can make a pot in it, a hole in this pot too. And I have a very not a nice video, but still you can have a look at it, how you can make a hole in it. I promise I will record another video on how to make holes in ceramic pots, a good one. But basically, again, the hole here is not a problem, but what I want you to know is the quality, the characteristics of a clay pot. And clay pot, compared to the plastic pot, breathes from all sides, from all sides. So basically, your soil is going to get drier quicker, which means that you will need to water, for example, more often. But again, this depends on your plant, which plant you grow in them. And then let's say we have ceramic pots, and ceramic pots are basically clay pots, but they are not really breathing. And ceramic pots are normally coming without holes, and they are very beautiful. They have different colors, and you can have them for like beauty, for aesthetics. And you can grow your plants in a plastic pot with holes and put the plant with the plastic pot into a ceramic pot. Now, if you would choose clay pot, you don't need another external pot for it, and some people do not really like clay pots because first of all they are heavy. If they fall, they break 100%, and also they have this kind of salt or like even sometimes mold on them. They basically require a little bit of more work because then you need to clean these pots from time to time. So now how to choose between these pots? So if you're growing a plant that needs to get drier quicker, right? For example, these can be plants that are prone to root rot or stem rot. And then you would choose, for these plants, you would choose a clay pot. And for succulents, if they are staying in wet soil for a long time, then they can easily get rotten. So maybe the best choice for succulents would be clay pots. On the other side, the plants that like humidity, for example, asparagus, phytonias, these you can grow easily in a plastic pot because these plants actually like humidity. So even if the soil will stay longer in this type of pots, that will be absolutely fine. Now, also about the pots, you need to know about the size of the pots. Basically, if you just pot up a plant which has just a couple of tiny roots, go for a smaller pot. Don't think that, okay, let me choose a bigger pot now because anyway the plant is going to grow. Usually you need to kind of compare the size of the pot with the roots, and if you have just a couple of tiny roots, go for a smaller pot and increase the size of the pot step by step. Because what happens if you choose a big pot and you plant a smaller plant there that has not enough roots, and there's plenty of space for bacteria to grow and develop, and also this can be this can cause root rot for your plant, even stem rot, because many bacteria and fungus can grow easily here and be basically harmful for your plants. So choose a pot which is relative to the size of the roots that you have. But it also, of course, depends on the type of the plant. So if you know that, for example, these plants grow very fast and they grow roots very fast, then you can go for a little bit bigger pot. However, if you know that the plant is basically not such a fast grower, not such a fast growing plant, definitely go for a smaller pot, and you can always increase the size of it every year. You can repot it, and this will be even better because then you will basically replace the soil and replace it with a fresh soil. Now let's talk about soil. I had a video about different types of soil and basically components, what you can mix to it to improve the quality, again, based on your plants. But basically, the most important thing here is to understand, first of all, what plant do you have? So basically, you will find out the name of the plant, and then it will be easier for you to do the research and find what type of soil these plants need. Basically, if it's a succulent soil, make sure that you go for a sandy soil, or if it's more, let's say, anthuriums, philodendrons, then you need to make sure that it's a very light soil, maybe even with bark in it, perlite, very light soil that will have, you know, air ventilation in a proper way there. Okay, let's talk about light. And light is the most important thing, I would say, for the plants, because basically without sunlight, the plants are not able to do the photosynthesis. And again, knowing what plant you have will help you to understand how much sunlight your plants need. I would say here the mistake is normally when people think that, okay, if it's a succulent, I can put it under the direct sunlight. It really depends on your conditions, on your climate. There are specific succulents that do not really grow under the direct burning, scorching sun, so you will even burn your plants. So make sure that you do not really think, okay, it's a succulent and 100% they need you know, sunlight the whole day. And of course, the tricky part here is when in winter, for example, we have shorter periods of daylight, and in this case our plants are struggling, of course. And maybe for the winter, especially, again, depending on your country, on your climate, you may need to use some natural grow lights to help your plants kind of stay alive and do not really get damaged, or you do not really get weak before the next spring. And also here, the differentiation between indirect sunlight and direct sunlight is a little bit relative, of course, because it really depends also, again, on your climate. If we say, let's say this plant likes sun, but you have direct sun which is really burning, then really depends which plants you can grow under this plant. Mostly when we say indirect sunlight, it means that, for example, if you have sun in your window, then the plant is basically growing a little bit far away, just a little bit from the window where it's very bright, but you do not have direct sunlight on the plant. Or, for example, if you have the window and you have this very light curtains, and the sun is touching the plant basically through the curtain, then in this case it should be fine. In any case, I would say put your plants in different areas where you would like them to grow, and then see how they feel, and then move according to the sun and according to the growth of your plant. If you feel that in one corner your plant is not growing at all, most probably they need more sunlight. The lack of sunlight can cause, you know, your plant getting weaker or not blooming, or even the size of the leaves will be smaller. But if you will put your plant in a brighter area, you will notice that the size of the leaves will be bigger, the plant will look healthier, and of course it will bloom, and when it blooms the flowers will also be bigger and the colors will be brighter. As for watering, I think this is the most important part here, because watering is basically incorrect watering is #1 problem for our plants, because very often we lose the plants because of root rot or stem rot, which is caused by overwatering. Now with watering we have two problems, right? Overwatering, but also it can be underwatering. So if your plant needs humidity, for example, the same Phytonia, then you need to make sure that you keep the soil always slightly moist. It still should not be wet all the time, but if the soil gets dry and stays dry for a couple of days, you will notice that the leaves will be wilted and the plant will suffer actually. On the other side, if plants need to get completely dry before the next watering, for example succulents, and if you keep their soil always moist, this can also cause problems for them. So underwatering is a problem, but also overwatering is a problem. So to find the right balance for your plants, you will need to understand again what type of plant you have, how it grows, what type of soil it is, what type of pot it is, how much light it receives, also what temperature it grows in, what's the temperature of the room, or maybe if you're growing the plants outside, what is the weather, what's the climate outside. So this all will basically determine how often you water and how much you water. And if you would like to see another video dedicated to watering only, please write your comments under this video so that I will know that this topic is interesting for you, and I will record a separate video about watering. Let's talk about fertilizing. Of course, the plants need a little bit of help in terms of fertilizing, because in the nature they're growing in the soil and basically in the ground, and they have all these natural processes, the insects and falling leaves and everything, and they have all the nutrients that they need. However, when we grow them in pots, it's a very limited space, and after a while the nutrients will be used and there's nothing that will basically replace fresh nutrients. So what we need to do is, of course, to fertilize our plants, but again, it doesn't mean that the more you fertilize, the better your plant will grow. Actually, the excess of fertilizers will harm your plant, so you really need to know what type of plant it is and how much you need to fertilize it. Try maybe with a lower dosage that you will find then you will find on the package or on the bottle, and see how it goes. Test with one plant and then move on with others as well. And of course, there are so many types of fertilizers, liquid, sticks, some powder. It really depends which one you would like to. They're all more or less the same. Make sure that you use the right fertilizer for the right plants. For example, for succulents, you will have very specific fertilizer. For orchids, it will be different. For palm trees, it will be different. For flowering plants, or for plants with beautiful foliage, this will be different. So make sure you pick the right one, and then also take a look at the period, because you will need to fertilize mostly from spring till end of summer, maybe beginning of autumn, but not in the winter. So repotting. For repotting, of course, make sure that you, of course, use fresh soil, and normally the best period to repot our plants is spring, because in the summer the full vegetation is already in full force, and also it may be a little bit too hot for the plant. They may already struggle with hot weather, again depending on your climate, and so the best period to repot our plants is in the spring, when we basically replace the old soil with fresh soil with nutrients, and also maybe change also the size of the pot. However, for the bigger plants, maybe you don't need to repot them every year. For example, if you have bigger plants like palm trees, dracaenas, or I have a huge Monstera, these plants I can repot maybe 3-4 years, every 3-4 years, or even 5 years. It really depends how they grow. And basically you will need to know already the condition of the soil, the plant growth, the health in general, the health of the plant. And remember that bigger trees, when you repot them, it's a bigger stress for them than repotting smaller ones. So make sure not to stress your plants out very often. Instead, maybe it's worth to leave them in the same pot and instead fertilize them rather than changing the pot, the soil, and repotting them basically. And finally, propagation. There are so many ways to propagate plants. Again, depending on the plant, it also depends, of course, on the plant, how the plant is able to be propagated, so how it's able to reproduce itself. For some plants, it may be seeds. For some plants, it can be cuttings, like stem cuttings, leaf cuttings. Some plants can be propagated by cutting the bulb or the tuber. So it really depends again on your plant. And again, the best period to propagate is spring, when the weather starts to get warmer, because this is the period where the vegetation starts, when basically the plant starts to grow actively and the weather is not very hot. So this will be the best period for you to propagate. If you have noticed, I have mentioned for a couple of times based on the plant and based on your climate. These two are the most important things to consider. You need to know what plant it is, that's number one, and then you need to know your growing conditions. And by growing conditions, I mean your country, your climate, even the climate and environment in your room, in that one room in your house where you're going to grow plants. Because even in different rooms, the climate can be different, the environment can be different, the access to light, the humidity, everything can be different. So you need to pay attention to these two, what type of plant you have and the conditions, to make sure that you will choose the right pot, the right soil, the right amount of light and watering, and also you will know how to fertilize it. So basically this all plays a huge role in growing plants successfully and for your plants to be also healthy and bloom for you. So if you would like to know more about plants, more about plant growing tips, propagation, consider subscribing to this channel and click on the bell button, of course, to be notified of all other videos that I will be posting every week. And stay passionate about plants. See you next time.